My name is Kathy Mirrer. I wrote this book called Dream, Believe, Achieve, from Wall Street Secretary to President of a Public Company. And the essence of the book is, if I can do it, anybody can do it, okay? So I want to give you my little story. My story is, we were very poor, very poor. We didn't have a car. We took a trolley to the bus to get to church, but we had unity in our family. It was wonderful. We were all very close to my mother, my father, my sister, and myself. So my mother always told us, life is for sharing. God put us on this earth to share with one another. And she instilled that in us, and I thought, what would I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a teacher. That's my life story. I want to share my knowledge as a teacher with the students. So I kept thinking about it. Well, while I was in high school, I was able to get a scholarship for half tuition. Well, I went home. I was so excited. I said, Mom, Dad, guess what? Anyway, I looked at my mother. I said, I know there's going to be more to it than this. So my mother called me in the room, and she said, you've never been away from home. You're only 17 years old. And your father and I need the money. You really have to go to school, to work after school. You can't go for a degree. And I thought, oh no. I was devastated, so I couldn't do it. So anyway, but that was always my dream, to share my life with the students and and feel like I was family with them, to make them feel good about their learning. So anyway, I graduated high school, and I thought, well, I have to, I guess, be a secretary. I was a pretty good typist, so I became a secretary, and I always went with the legal firms because they paid the most. So anyway, I met my husband on the job. So we got married, and we lived in New York. So one day he said to me, Kathy, I have very good news for you. I said, what's that? He said, I'm getting a big box tomorrow. Again, remember, it's 1982. So I said, what's in the box? You'll see. I said, all right. So the following day, we get to work, and I was his temporary secretary, so to speak. And two men showed up with this great big box, at least twice my height. And I said, what is it? He said, you'll see. So they opened up the box. The guy plugs it into the wall. He puts a big manual on top of the box. He says, okay, you're ready. And he gave my husband the receipt, which made it that my husband did receive it. Okay, I said, honey, what is it? He said, I don't know, they call it a computer. This was back in 1982. I said, what is a computer? He said, I don't know. I said, honey, what does it do? He said, well, it's supposed to process words. I said, it can't. My mother has a food processor. She processes food, but they're tangible. But how do you process words? It doesn't make sense. He said, I don't know. I'm only a lawyer. I can't help you. I said, all right, thanks. I looked at the manual, 250 pages, and oh my God, I come from the typewriter era. I'm intimidated by the manual, let alone the computer itself. I thought, oh Christ, who's going to learn this computer? Ridiculous. So anyway, I go back and forth in the office, back and forth every day. And then I said, wait a minute, I'm not going to let this thing beat me. So I pick up the manual, 250 pages. I said, honey, I know what I'm going to do. He said, what are you going to do? I want to stay home, get a temporary secretary, and I want to narrow down the book to just the beginnings. That's all, just the beginnings. He said, all right, do what you have to. So I stayed home. 6 weeks I was home, working on this manual, bringing it down in size, bringing it down. And then I said, the most important things are, they have to print. The person that I start training will have to know just the basics. That's all we can expect. And then from the basics, we'll move on from there. So anyway, my book turned out to be 25 pages, and it was a lot less intimidating than 250 pages. So I said to my husband, all right, I think I'll go in the office one night, make sure what I wrote was correct as far as each step involved. So anyway, I went in the office, I had to make some changes, and then I said to him, honey, I want to put an ad in the paper. I want to start training people on the basics. So I put an ad in the Village Voice in New York, and that Monday, 4 people showed up at the door, and I said, oh, were you here for the training? He said, yes, 2 actors, 2 actresses. They came to New York to see their name in lights. I said, wonderful. And I said to my husband, gee, this is exciting, you know? He said, yeah. So anyway, they gave me such a sad story. The 4 of them lived together in an apartment in New York, and they had to flip a coin every night to find out who's going to actually use the bed, 1-person bed. The others all slept on the floor. I thought, oh God, how sad. Anyway, so I started training one at a time, and then they told their friends, who told their friends, who told their friends, and I said, honey, I'm going to be training for the rest of my life. I mean, I can't keep training people on one computer. Something doesn't make sense. You know what? I'm going to take time off again. I want to be home and find out if there are other programs. Can't be a computer with one program. So I stayed home and I checked, I called so many people, and I found out there were really 4 programs on the computer. I was training on Word, but there was WordPerfect, DBase, and Lotus. I thought, oh, that makes more sense. 4 programs instead of just 1. So I said to my husband, you know what, hon? You know what? I've always wanted to be a teacher. Maybe we could set up a training center, not just 1 computer. It won't go anywhere, just 1. So anyway, I said, do you know of any place, any office that's available for rent? He says, yeah, I think the adjoining office to yours is available. Let's check on it. So we did, and we were overwhelmed. It was great. We said to ourselves, we probably can fit about 10 computers in here. Not 10, I'm sorry, 20. And I thought this could really become something. Again, it's in 1982. So I was all excited about it. And I said, well, you know, hon, with all these programs out, 4 programs, I've got to get instructors. I said, I'm going to put an ad in the paper again. So this is a wonderful little story. I put an ad in the paper, and a gentleman calls on Sunday. And I said, oh, okay, can I help you? Yeah, I'm answering your ad. After 3 sentences, I knew I was going to hire him. He seemed very compassionate, that he would understand people coming from a typewriter to this big device. I mean, he'd understand. He seemed to be a very compassionate person. So I said, are you able to come in tomorrow? I'd like to interview you. Yes. He said, but you won't like me when you meet me. I said, well, let me decide that for myself. And I thought, that's an odd thing to say. So anyway, he came in the next day. He was an elderly person with a cane, very wobbly, and he sat down in my office and he said, you see what I mean? And that's when I pointed, and I hate doing that. I said, let me tell you something, George. Everyone has imperfections, and some are more obvious than others. Well, then he had tears in his eyes. I said, gee, I'm sorry, I hurt you. What did I say? He said, Kathy, no, you're the only one that's given me a chance. Anytime I go in for an interview, they look at me with the cane and all, and they say, we'll give you a call, George. They never called. I said, George, you were hired from your voice on the phone. I liked you. I knew you'd be compassionate to the students going from a typewriter. I'm at the top of it. The typewriter to a computer. I'm terrified myself. So he said, let me tell you, I said, you are going to turn out to be one of our best instructors. And he did. People loved him. They always asked for George. He was like a changed human being. It was wonderful. So then I started hiring other people, and the business started growing and growing. Then I said to my husband, now we have to get customers. You know, we have to get, we have to get who's going to benefit the most from our training. And I thought one night, wow, the software manufacturers, the more training, the more trained personnel, the more software they'll be able to sell. So again, I said to he said, you don't have to tell me. You want to take off and work out of the house again? I said, exactly. So I did. And I checked here, checked there, checked everything. And what I did was I found out the people in charge of the programs themselves. And I spoke to each person separately and invited them to come into our training center. They came in, they were overwhelmed. I said, you know, you'll gain out of it too, because let me remind you, we are not only a training center, as of tomorrow, we're a placement service too. People are going to be capitalizing on their training. They said, this is wonderful, it's too good to be true. So that worked out very well. So my husband confronted me at home one day and he said, Kathy, I had to tell you this, we're running out of funds. It's getting terrible. We don't have that much time left. I said, honey, you have all the business acumen, I don't. I said, so do what you have to. He said, well, we'll have to call in brokers. 2 brokers came in a couple of days later. He showed them the training center. They were very impressed. They said, terrific. And I said, let me remind you, gentlemen, we are also a placement service now too, training and placement. And they said, oh my God, this is terrific. And then they looked at me and they said, and you at the head of the company, this is wonderful. You'll be the first woman training people on computers. I said, no, you don't want me. I just went to high school. I have no business acumen. I've never had a business. My husband is the one. And they started packing. They said, no, we want you. And then my husband called me in the room and gave me a talking to. They want you. And I said, I know, but I can't do it. I'm petrified. I was like this. I can't do it. Me, the president of a public company? No, you've got the wrong person. He said, if you don't do it, we're out of business. So I left the room and I was jittery inside. I tried to smile and the guys looked at me. Oh, good, you're really up to it, right? God. So anyway, we became a public company, and I'm going to end it with the best part of the business was the 12 years I was in business. You know what it was? Seeing people smile, seeing people get jobs, seeing people who didn't think they were at the end of the line. No, we helped a metamorphosis in them. They were completely different. And they say, thank you, Kathy. Don't thank me, honey. You're the one that's going out on these jobs. You're the one that's always being asked for again. So again, I totally agree. I'll put it in writing. With passion, anything can be achieved in life. The passion is the driving force with me. I became a teacher without a teaching degree. I only went to high school, but my deep love for wanting to share with the students and going on, and I was able to do it. So anybody can do it. Take my word for it.